What is up, guys? So today I'm going to be showing you guys a bit of, there I am. I'm going to be showing you guys my study guide. I'm going to be studying to prepare for this exam, and a bit of a test I'm also going to be studying. It's also a practice test to get ready. So this is my online study guide. So a bit of the embryonic development here. We're just going to be studying through some of this with me. As I've made sure to put in some of the figures that I went over in the previous video when I went over the study guide. So as before, some of the functions here, the cerebrum is all about those conscious thoughts, thought processes, intellectual functions, memory and storage, conscious. The cerebrum's this top portion right here. Some skeletal muscle regulation. The diencephalon, of course, includes the thalamus, the hypothalamus, controlling the thalamus relays processing and processes sensory information. Hypothalamus controls emotion, autonomic function, and hormone production. There's a midbrain right here. Processes visual and auditory data. Generates reflexives and somatic responses, maintains consciousness. Also there's the should be the RAS, reticular activating system, also here. The pons is the relays sensory information to the cerebellum. The pons relays sensory information to the cerebellum and the thalamus. Medulla relays sensory information to the thalamus and other portions of the brainstem. Autonomic centers for regulation of visceral function, cardiovascular, respiratory, and digestive system activities. Cerebellum adjusts output of our somatic motor centers in the brain and spinal cord. And the different types of meninges. Not too important for this exam though. Cerebrospinal fluid is, I think, very important for this exam. So some of the functions of the cerebrospinal fluid. So it's maintained by pH, increasing oxygen demand, ATP, glucose, glycogen demand. Some of the functions include cushions the brain and spinal cord from physical trauma. Supports the brain, makes the brain lighter, and transports nutrients, chemical messengers, and waste. Circulation goes from the choroid for cerebrospinal fluid goes from the choroid plexus to ventricles to the central canal of spinal cord, subarachnoid space to the arachnoid granulations absorbed into venous circulation. Another figure of cerebrospinal fluid we studied in class. Choroid plexus right here. Circulates there. Cerebrospinal fluid then reaches subarachnoid space. Then to the brain and spinal cord, then to venous circulation right here. The blood-brain barrier has capillary endothelial cells connected by tight junctions. Uses astrocytes to regulate permeability, selective and directional. There's neural pathways to and from the brain. There's a sensory pathway to the brain. First, second, and third order neurons from receptors are used here. First order neurons have sensory impulse from sensory receptors. Then goes to the dorsal root ganglion or the cranial nerve ganglion, special sensory to the central nervous system, spinal cord, brain, and brainstem. Then the second order neurons, synapse. The first synapse at the central nervous system, then to the thalamus. Information crosses over from one side of the central nervous system to the other. So the decussation point, information traveling from left to right or right to left from here at the second order. Third order neuron is info from the thalamus to the brain, or by brain we mean cerebral cortex or cerebellum, primary sensory cortex. Primary sensory, not primary motor. We go sensory to association areas, then to motor. So here's a figure I found online to help you guys visualize these orders. So we start at the peripheral nervous system, we get a stimulus stimulating our receptors, then to an afferent neuron, first order neuron. It's a little neuron right here. Then to the spinal cord, or brain stem. Then we go through a second order neuron to the. This is the first synapse, by the way. Then we go to a second order neuron to the thalamus. Synapse right here. At the thalamus, information is relayed. We're at the central nervous system area at this point. And then we go to the third order neuron, which leads to the cerebral cortex. A little bit of decussation happens right here. Cerebral cortex and cerebellum. Motor pathways from the brain. Pyramidal and extrapyramidal, these are the ones leading to effectors. Cerebral cortex and somatic motor info. Pyramidal pathways are the direct innervation of motor neurons' conscious skeletal movements. Both of these are somatic also. Pyramidal tracts of the medulla to the spinal cord to the cerebral cortex to voluntary motor effectors. Fast-moving info, less synapses, monosynaptic, very fast. Extrapyramidal pathways is about indirect innervation of motor neurons, involuntary or subconscious skeletal movements. It's unmyelinated axons. Unmyelinated axons, more synapses, automatic. An example would be swinging your arms while walking, so polysynaptic. Here's another picture, so you can visualize the primary motor cortex, primary somatosensory cortex. So this one, the somatosensory, receives the stimulus first, then it goes to association areas such as visual, auditory association areas, then it goes into the primary motor cortex to be, it's also processed by the prefrontal cortex also, and then primary motor cortex going to the effectors area. So those are the motor and sensory regions of the cerebral cortex, and on to the brain structures and functions. The medulla, important for breathing, heart rate, centers for recording a complex autonomic reflexes and control visceral functions, as we've seen with pyramidal pathways. Starts at the medulla, goes into cerebral cortex then to the effectors. So it's also part of that autonomic reflexes and control visceral functions to pass sensory info to the thalamus. Medulla passes to the thalamus. Yep. No, here's some pictures of the medulla right there. Medulla oblongata. If you want to get more detailed, for my example, you don't need to get too detailed onto this. The pons, more on the motor control and sensory analysis, consciousness, movement, posture. Next to cerebellum, viscera, and somatic control centers. Link cerebellum with the brainstem, cerebrum, and spinal cord. As you can see, here's a picture of the pons. There's a cerebellum. Cerebrum would be above here. Spinal cord, medulla. Helps with balance and coordination, innervates jaw/face/eye muscles. So there's, of course, on the pons, there's a reticular formation right there. There's the apneustic and pneumataxic centers for respiration regulation. And of course some cranial nerves here. Cerebellum, regulation/coordination of movement, posture, and balance. Compares motor commands with proprioceptive info position from spinal cord, make adjustments to smooth muscle movements, muscle memory of skeletal muscles, coordinates learning reflexive patterns of muscle activity at the conscious level. Info comes in from the cerebral cortex, pons, special receptors, and spinal cord, proprioceptors, and sends it to skeletal muscles to reposition. Your midbrain is the center for vision, hearing, eye, movement, body. The midbrain? Oh, there's no midbrain. So, around the cerebellum. Midbrain is the center for vision, hearing, eye movement, body movement, voluntary motor function, cerebral peduncles, and also contains the reticular activating system, RAS, or reticular formation. Here's a bit of a picture of the midbrain. You can see the pineal gland. Secretes the endocrine hormones there. There's a reticular formation right there, thalamus. Okay. Hypothalamus, function, homeostasis, emotions, thirst, hunger, circadian rhythms, autonomic nervous system, pituitary glands, forms link between endocrine and nervous system, stimulated by sensory info from brain stem, spinal cord, cerebrospinal fluid, composition, change, chemical stimuli, processes, olfactory sensations, eating reflexes, subconscious control of skeletal muscle contractions, facial expressions, basic movements for sexual activity. Controls pituitary gland by secretion of hormones into the anterior pituitary gland. ADH, antidiuretic hormone, restricts water loss. Okay, we're still talking about the thalamus. Yeah, hypothalamus. Oxytocin stimulates smooth muscle contractions in the uterus, mammary glands, and prostate. Another function would be regulating body temperature, controlling sleep and wake cycles, receiving input from the eyes. So there's some endocrine responses here. And the hypothalamus, and here's a picture. Better view of your hypothalamus, your pineal gland. Hypothalamus, the thalamus above it. Pituitary gland, posterior, and anterior. Then on to the thalamus. The thalamus is the final relay point for sensory information from the spinal nerves before going to the primary sensory cortex, or the postcentral gyrus of the cerebral cortex. Filters out what should be processed by higher brain functions. So it's the filter, the magical sieve, before we reach the sensory cortex. Axons from sensory system. Synapse here at the relay site. Awareness of emotional states. Connects motor info, hypothalamus to cerebral cortex. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, different lobes. limbic system, frontal lobes, all these different lobes of your thalamus. If it was taken out of the brain, it would look like this. And then we have the epithalamus. Controls third ventricle, contains choroid plexus, pineal gland for endocrine structures, secreting melatonin, regulating day and night cycles by increasing sleepiness, or secreted to retina of the eyes. The limbic system functions in, it's also in should be in the hypothalamus area also. Limbic system functions in emotion, motivation, and memory. Links emotions and behavior, conscious to sub/unconscious response. The amygdala controls memory, emotions, fear, anxiety, links emotion specific memories, fight or flight. The hippocampus responsible for learning and memory, converting short-term to long-term memory, calling spatial relationships. Long-term memory is secondary, fade with time, tertiary time. Here's a picture of your limbic system. Limbic system includes your thalamus, hypothalamus, and reticular formation, which cannot be seen. So there's your thalamus, hypothalamus parts, right there. Reticular activating system in states of consciousness, RES headquarters, reticular formation of the midbrain. Reticular formation of midbrain, inactive. Inactive cerebral cortex is less alert, responsive to stimulus, depresses RES activity with serotonin from pineal gland. If it's active cerebral cortex is more alert, attentive, awake, sensory information, stimulates RES activity with norepinephrine. Norepinephrine stimulates that. If you want to depress your RES, you use serotonin. State of consciousness, if you're conscious, it means you're aware and have attention to external events. Nod, coma, sleep. Different types of sleep here, but I don't need to know them for my exam. The cerebrum has sensory cortex, location in the parietal lobe, postcentral gyrus, primary central cortex. Sensory cortex comes first. Receives general somatic info from receptors such as touch, pain. So we go from the thalamus to the postcentral gyrus, or to the primary sensory cortex. Yeah, lots of different names for these things. And there's also a visual cortex, auditory, occipital complex, motor complex, frontal lobe. So now we're going from primary motor cortex for direct voluntary movement by controlling somatic neurons in the brainstem and spinal cord. Pyramidal cells here, because somatic nervous system. Association areas, we have to have associations here after we pick it up from receptors into our cortexes. Visual, sight, hearing, premotor cortex, learn movements. There's integrative areas, receives info from associative areas and direct complex motor activities. Cross/switch over, prefrontal cortex allows prediction judgment based on past experiences. Hemispheric lateralization, brain hemispheres are responsible for specific functions not ordinarily performed by opposite hemispheres. So that term is important, lateralization. So left is usually the dominant one for reading, writing, speaking, calculations, and decision making. The right brain is usually for recognizing faces, identifying familiar objects by general senses, very spatial analysis. Here's a bit of a picture of the cerebellum. Okay, the cranial nerves. And then there's the cranial reflexes, somatic. So somatic reflexes include corneal, blinking of eyelids, trigeminal to facial. Tympanic is reduced movement of auditory ossicles, vestibulocochlear to facial. Cranial nerves, these are cranial nerves. Auditory eye/head movement triggered by sudden sounds. Vestibulo-ocular opposite movement of the eyes. Field of vision, vestibulocochlear, oculomotor, trochlear, abducens. Visceral direct light reflex, constriction of these different pupils. I'm probably not going to use those. So here's a table from the book. Corneal reflex, contact with the corneal surface. Is a trigeminal. Auditory reflex, vestibule, and tympanic, vestibulocochlear. This one's very easy. This one's very easy to remember. And then some of the sympathetic and parasympathetic reflexes to know. Gastric and intestinal reflexes uses the vagus nerve. For smooth muscle contraction, propels food and mixed with secretions. Defecation, distension of the rectum. Relaxation of anal sphincters. Urination. Contraction of walls. The urinary bladder. Swallowing reflexes. Medullary swallowing center. Sympathetic, cardiac saltatory reflex. Increasing heart rate and contraction. Somatic versus autonomic nervous system differences here. Input comes in from visceral sensory receptors, then goes to visceral organs via hypothalamus or medulla. Innervated visceral effectors. Characteristics involve efferent ganglia. Parasympathetic vision, rest and digest. Sympathetic division, preganglial fibers are short, ganglia close to the spinal cord, postganglial fibers are long. Okay. Some of the fibers and different organs innervated by the autonomic nervous system, different pathways, reflexes. Sympathetic, short, preganglionic, long, postganglionic. Bloodstream for sympathetic, parasympathetic. Long, preganglionic, short, postganglionic. Dual innervation organs. Organs can be innervated by both sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. Autonomic tone, both sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions work together to balance. just studying some of these. So the way I memorize the cranial nerves is using this mnemonic. O, O, O. I know it's very weird to touch and feel very green vegetables. Heavens. I know it's very weird, but it helps me. And that's it. I'm about to take my exam now. Let's hope it goes well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.